Section 1. The Machine. No one took seriously. June 13, 1944. Near Carentan, Normandy, France. Rain clings to everything. It beads on steel helmets, darkens wool uniforms, turns the hedgerows into dripping walls of mud and shadow. The distant rumble of artillery rolls like slow thunder beyond the fields. Somewhere to the west, an American battery fires again. A dull concussion that makes the ground tremble underfoot. Oberstleutnant Hans von der Heide pauses at the edge of a sunken lane and raises his hand. The column behind him halts. Boots sink ankle-deep into churned earth. Horses snort, engines idle unevenly. Ahead, abandoned at an angle against a stone wall, sits a small, squat vehicle. It looks almost ridiculous. Low to the ground, flat hood, thin tires caked with Normandy mud. No armor worth speaking of. No roof, no doors. A crude canvas top folded uselessly at the rear. Painted on the side, half obscured by grime, is a white five-pointed star, a Jeep. Von der Heide studies it in silence. He has seen dozens of them in the past week, zipping down roads under artillery fire, bouncing through fields no Kubelwagen would dare attempt, appearing where no vehicle should logically be able to go. This one is intact. The American crew has vanished, leaving behind maps still tucked into the dash, a helmet wedged under the seat, and an empty .30 caliber ammo box rattling softly in the wind. He steps closer, touches the hood. It is still warm. Someone mutters behind him, almost dismissively, "Ein Spielzeug." A toy. Von der Heide does not answer, because something about this machine is bothering him. And it has nothing to do with firepower. 3 years earlier, in the summer of 1941, no one in the German High Command would have given such a vehicle a second glance. The Wehrmacht is built on doctrine, on hierarchy, on clearly defined roles for machines and men. Reconnaissance vehicles are armored. Command cars are staff vehicles. Infantry moves on foot or by truck. Tanks spearhead. Everything has its place. The Jeep does not fit anywhere. When reports first surfaced from the Eastern Front and North Africa describing a small American reconnaissance car, they are waved aside. Too light, too crude, too exposed to survive real combat. German officers pride themselves on engineering elegance. The precision of a Panzer III transmission, the careful balance of the said Kfz 222 armored car. The rational design of the Kubelwagen. The Jeep looks like something built in a barn. Stamped steel, exposed bolts, leaf springs that squeak under load, a windshield that folds forward like an afterthought. And yet, by late 1942, German intelligence summaries begin mentioning it more frequently. Captured enemy light vehicle shows unusual cross-country mobility. Observed operating independently ahead of main forces. Appears in large numbers. Always the same phrase appears at the end. Driver training minimal. That detail unsettles people. The Willys MB Jeep is not designed to be impressive. It is designed to work. Born out of panic in 1940, when the U.S. Army realizes it lacks a standardized light reconnaissance vehicle. The Jeep is the product of urgency, not tradition. Willys Overland strips the design to essentials. 4-wheel drive, a simple engine, minimal weight, and parts that can be replaced by anyone with basic tools. It is not comfortable. It is not elegant. It is everywhere. By the time American forces land in North Africa in Operation Torch, the Jeep is already woven into their daily routine. Officers ride in them. Medics load stretchers across their hoods. Radio operators bolt antennas onto their frames. Engineers tow guns that should, by all logic, be too heavy. German troops begin capturing them, and instead of sending them to scrap yards, they keep them. They repaint them. They use them. That alone is an admission. In Tunisia, in early 1943, Hauptmann Wilhelm von Thoma, later captured at El Alamein, reportedly drives a captured Jeep himself during an inspection. He notes how it climbs terrain his Kübelwagen cannot, how it starts reliably in cold mornings, how it requires almost no maintenance. The Americans, he remarks dryly, have built a vehicle for amateurs. But behind the joke is something more serious. Amateurs mean numbers. Numbers mean flexibility. Flexibility means speed. And speed in modern war is everything. Back in Normandy, von der Heide finally straightens and turns to his adjutant. "Get it running," he says. Within minutes, a German soldier is behind the wheel. The engine coughs once, then starts immediately. No tuning, no coaxing. The Jeep lurches forward, splashes through a flooded ditch, climbs out the far side, and keeps going. Von der Heide watches it disappear down the lane, then looks at the map still folded on the hood of the abandoned American vehicle. The front lines marked on it are already obsolete, because the Americans are no longer advancing along roads. They are flowing. And suddenly, standing in the Normandy mud, a German officer begins to understand something unsettling. The war is not being decided only by tanks and artillery. It is being decided by movement, by who can get there first, by who can turn speed into dominance. And the Americans, it seems, have found a way to move everywhere, all at once. Section 2. The Capture and the Comparison. July 2nd, 1944. Saint-Lô-Perrier Road, Normandy. The sun is barely up when the column halts again. A German supply convoy, trucks, half-tracks, and 2 weary Panzer IVs, sits nose to tail along a narrow Norman road. Hedgerows pressing in so tightly that opening a door is a challenge. Engines idle. Men smoke. Someone curses the delay. Then, without warning, a Jeep bursts out of a gap in the hedges less than 50 meters away. It is moving fast. Too fast. An American lieutenant stands upright in the passenger seat, gripping the windshield frame with one hand, pointing with the other. The driver barely slows as the vehicle skids across the road, splashing mud, wheels biting hard. A .50 caliber machine gun mounted in the rear swings toward the convoy. The first burst shreds a fuel truck. Flames roar upward, panic erupts. Before the German gunners can traverse their weapons, the Jeep is gone, vanishing back into the bocage like an animal that knows every path through the forest. The entire engagement lasts less than 20 seconds. Afterward, Lieutenant Ernst Keller sits on an ammunition crate, helmet off, staring at the burning wreckage. His hands shake slightly, not from fear, but from confusion. That, he says quietly, was not reconnaissance. He is right. It was something else. By the summer of 1944, German officers are no longer encountering Jeeps as curiosities. They are encountering them as symptoms. Everywhere German units attempt to stabilize a line, American patrols appear behind them. Communications break down. Orders arrive late, or not at all. Artillery observers seem to materialize on hills that should have been unreachable overnight. Again and again, reports mention the same vehicle. Enemy light cars observed operating deep behind lines. Extremely rapid lateral movement. Difficult to predict avenues of approach. At regimental and divisional headquarters, comparisons begin. Quiet ones, spoken over maps and cigarette smoke. The Kübelwagen is reliable, efficient, designed for roads and firm ground. It does exactly what it is meant to do. The Jeep does what it is not meant to do, and then more. It drives across fields, through streams, over rubble. It can be lifted by 4 men, towed behind tanks, dropped from ships and aircraft. If it breaks, it is fixed with scavenged parts and profanity. Most alarming of all, it is not precious. German vehicles are husbanded, maintained carefully, allocated by rank. American Jeeps are everywhere. Driven hard, abandoned, replaced. Loss does not slow the system. It feeds it. In late July, following the American breakout from Saint-Lô, Operation Cobra, German staff officers gather in a commandeered farmhouse near Veer. The walls still smell of livestock. Maps cover the table. Red grease pencil arrows mark where the Americans were yesterday, not where they are now. General Major Fritz Bayerlein, commander of Panzer Lehr Division, listens as reports come in. His once elite formation has been mauled, not only by air power and artillery, but by something more insidious. The Americans are bypassing strong points. They are not fighting where expected. They are appearing on flanks, rear areas, crossroads, often with no tanks in sight. Forward observers arrive in jeeps. Engineers arrive in jeeps. Commanders arrive in jeeps. And then, hours later, armor follows, guided precisely to weak points already identified. Bayerlein rubs his temples. This is not how wars are supposed to move, he mutters. But it is how this one moves now. Captured American vehicles are brought into German service in increasing numbers. Some units repaint them gray. Others leave the stars and hope for the best. Mechanics marvel at how forgiving the engines are. How little training is required. A German NCO jokes that even a farm boy could drive one. That joke lands harder than intended, because that is exactly who is driving them. American divisions are full of men who, 2 years earlier, had never worn a uniform. Farmers, mechanics, delivery drivers. The Jeep turns their civilian instincts into military advantage. They improvise routes. They take chances. They trust the machine. German doctrine does not allow this kind of freedom. German vehicles move according to orders. American vehicles move according to opportunity. And in a war of movement, opportunity is decisive. Somewhere east of Avranches, a German signals officer intercepts an American radio transmission. The call signs change rapidly. The cadence is casual, almost relaxed. The voice at the other end mentions a grid reference. We'll be there in 5. 5 minutes later, they are. A column of jeeps crests a ridge. Radios crackling, dust trailing behind them like smoke. Infantry jogs behind, light and fast. The German officer lowers his headphones slowly. This is no longer a question of bravery, or even tactics. It is a question of tempo, and Germany's losing it. That evening, as darkness settles over Normandy, von der Heide rides again in the captured Jeep from Carentan. The engine hums steadily. The suspension absorbs the rutted road without complaint. He watches the countryside slide past and realizes something unsettling. This machine allows the Americans to think differently, to act differently, to fight differently. It compresses time, and in war, time is everything. Somewhere behind him, German units are still deploying. Somewhere ahead, American units are already moving. The Jeep does not fire a shot, but it is winning ground. Section 3. The Realization. August 1st, 1944. La Roche-Guyon, France. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's former headquarters sits heavy with silence. The stone chateau overlooking the Seine still bears the marks of hurried evacuation. Maps left half-rolled, chairs overturned, telephones dangling from severed cords. Rommel himself is gone now, wounded and recalled to Germany. But his staff officers remain, tasked with understanding how Normandy unraveled so quickly. At the center of the room stands a captured American Jeep. It has been rolled inside through the main doors, mud still clinging to its tires, white star hastily painted over with gray. The hood is open. A German major points with a pencil, tracing the engine layout as if mapping an unfamiliar organism. So simple, he says. No unnecessary complication. Another officer crouches beside the suspension, presses down with his weight, watches it rebound. This thing survives abuse, he murmurs. It expects it. No one laughs. They have seen what abuse looks like. By August 1944, the discussion inside German headquarters has changed tone. Earlier in the war, American equipment was dismissed as crude. Oversized, inefficient, dependent on wasteful abundance. Now the abundance itself has become the weapon. General Günther Blumentritt, Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, listens as a logistics officer explains why German counterattacks keep arriving too late. Fuel shortages are part of it, air interdiction another, but beneath all of it lies a simpler problem. American units arrive first, everywhere. Reconnaissance elements reach objectives before German formations have even completed road marches. American commanders maintain contact while moving. Orders flow continuously, not in rigid stages, and almost every report includes the same detail. Enemy command elements operating from light-wheeled vehicles. Jeep, Jeep, Jeep. Blumentritt exhales slowly. The Americans, he says, are no longer advancing along fronts. They are flowing. Captured German officers begin speaking more freely during interrogations. One Panzer Battalion commander, taken near Falaise, gestures with his hands as if pushing invisible pieces across a table. They did not fight the way we expected, he says. They did not stop to reorganize. They did not wait for us to finish reacting. He pauses. They were already somewhere else. When asked how American units coordinated so effectively, he gives a bitter smile. They drove. In late August, as the German army retreats toward the Seine and then beyond, a group of senior officers gathers briefly in Germany. A rare moment of reflection amid collapse. Among them is General Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Panzer Troops. Guderian listens more than he speaks. When someone mentions American light vehicles, he nods. Mobility, he says finally, is not only armor and engines. It is decision. The room quiets. We taught the world blitzkrieg. Guderian continues. But the Americans have industrialized it and made it forgiving. He does not need to explain what he means. German maneuver warfare demands precision. Trained crews, exact timing. Every breakdown cascades into failure. American maneuver warfare tolerates chaos. If one Jeep is lost, another appears. If a road is blocked, someone drives across a field. If orders change, the commander is already close enough to adapt. Mobility, the Germans realize too late, is not speed alone. It is resilience in motion. Across the Rhine, in a prisoner of war enclosure, a German major named Klaus Reinhardt sketches from memory. He draws a road junction, a farmhouse, a hedgerow. Then he adds arrows. This is where we thought they would come, he explains. Then he adds another arrow, curving, indirect. This is where they came. At the end of the arrow, he draws a small rectangle. Always this, he says. The Jeep. By September 1944, American armored columns are racing across France, covering distances in days that once took weeks. Supply lines stretch impossibly long, yet do not break. Fuel trucks follow Jeeps. Repair crews follow Jeeps. Staff officers follow Jeeps. The front line is no longer a line. It is a condition. German commanders, trained to visualize war as structured layers, struggle to respond. Every attempt to anchor defense fails when bypassed. Every reserve movement is spotted, reported, and outflanked. And the Jeep keeps appearing in the margins of every after-action report. Never as the main actor, always as the enabler, the thing that makes everything else possible. Near Aachen, a German artillery officer watches American vehicles crest a hill through binoculars. He expects half-tracks. He sees Jeeps instead. They fan out, radios flashing in the sun, antennas swaying with motion. One stops. An officer jumps out, consults a map on the hood, speaks into a handset. Minutes later, artillery fire begins. Precise, devastating. The Jeep moves again. The officer lowers his binoculars. They command while moving. He says quietly. We command, then move. The difference hangs in the air. That night, in a dimly lit room, a German staff officer writes in his diary, "We have been defeated by speed of thought as much as speed of steel." The American vehicle is not superior in strength. It is superior in what it allows men to do. He closes the notebook. Outside, engines hum, steady, unhurried. American engines. The war is no longer being decided at the point of contact. It is being decided in the space between decisions, and the Jeep owns that space. Section 4. Mobility becomes doctrine. September 7th, 1944. Near the Belgian border, outskirts of Liège, rain slicks the cobblestones as an American column rolls through the village before dawn. There is no parade order. No rigid formation. Trucks, half-tracks, tanks, and everywhere, jeeps, weaving through the narrow streets like water finding cracks in stone. Captain Robert Hastings rides in the passenger seat of a Willys MB, map folded against his knee. The driver, a corporal from Iowa, keeps one hand on the wheel and the other near the throttle, eyes flicking between road, hedgerow, and sky. Cut left after the church, Hastings says. The Jeep turns immediately. No signal flags. No messengers running on foot. Just motion, constant, uninterrupted. Behind them, an entire regiment adjusts its axis of advance based on that turn. By the autumn of 1944, the Jeep is no longer just a vehicle. It is doctrine on four wheels. American commanders have learned something the Germans once understood and then lost sight of. War favors those who move faster than the enemy can think. But unlike German blitzkrieg, American mobility does not depend on perfect execution. It depends on redundancy. If a German motorcycle messenger is killed, the message dies with him. If an American Jeep is destroyed, another arrives, usually within minutes. Mobility becomes less about brilliance, more about inevitability. German intelligence officers notice the pattern with growing clarity and growing despair. Interrogation reports now include a recurring phrase, enemy command elements unusually close to the front. This is not bravado. It is method. American colonels drive forward to see for themselves. They position themselves where radios work best, not where doctrine dictates. They issue orders from muddy crossroads, from shattered barns, from the hoods of Jeeps vibrating with engine heat. The Jeep does not replace hierarchy. It compresses it. Decisions that once took hours now take minutes, sometimes seconds. In a captured report from Army Group B, a German staff officer circles a sentence in red pencil. American units appear to maintain momentum even in confusion. In the margin, he writes a single word, Fahrzeuge, vehicles. At the tactical level, the Jeep reshapes combat in subtle but decisive ways. Forward observers ride closer to the line, adjusting artillery in real time. Engineers scout river crossings ahead of the main force. Medics reach wounded men faster than ever before, pulling them out before shock sets in. Even morale changes. American soldiers joke that the Jeep will go anywhere, and often does. Through mud, snow, shell holes, forest tracks not meant for vehicles at all. They trust it. And in war, trust multiplies speed. German troops, by contrast, begin to feel static. Fuel shortages limit movement. Horses reappear where trucks once ran. Orders arrive late, carried by exhausted runners or delayed radio transmissions. A German infantry lieutenant near the Hürtgen forest watches American Jeeps dart along a forest road under artillery fire. They move as if they know we cannot catch them, he tells his men. He is right. Captured Jeeps become prized assets among German units. White stars are painted over, Balkenkreuz markings slapped on hastily. But the illusion never lasts. Spare parts are scarce. Fuel is rationed. And without the logistical river behind them, the captured Jeeps become orphans. Reminders of a system Germany cannot replicate. One German mechanic writes home, their machine is simple, their system is not. By October 1944, the Western Front has changed character entirely. There are no clean pauses, no winterline yet. American formations probe constantly, shifting weight from one sector to another, exploiting weak points before they are fully understood. The Jeep is always there first. A scout vehicle cresting a ridge. A staff car arriving before a headquarters tent is even pitched. A radio antenna visible before the enemy realizes the ground has been lost. German generals, trained in an older rhythm of war, struggle to adapt. Their planning cycles assume time. Time to react, time to reposition, time to regain coherence. The Jeep steals that time. Every mile it covers collapses German margins for error. Every decision it enables shrinks the battlefield. In late October, General Gunther Blumentritt writes in a private letter, "We are no longer facing an enemy that advances. We are facing an enemy that appears." He does not mention the Jeep by name. He does not have to. As winter approaches, the Germans prepare one final gamble. A counteroffensive through the Ardennes. They hope surprise in weather will slow American mobility. They hope snow will bog down vehicles. They hope the Americans will finally stop moving. They underestimate what mobility has become. Not a tactic, a habit. On December mornings, Jeeps will start anyway. Engines coughing, then catching. Headlights hooded. Drivers leaning forward against the cold. Officers unfolding maps against frozen hoods. The war will lurch into one last violent convulsion, and when it does, the Jeep will be there. Not as a miracle weapon, but as the quiet constant that keeps American forces connected, informed, and moving. Even when everything else breaks down. Section 5. The enemy could still move. But not like this. December 19th, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow muffles everything. Artillery thumps sound distant. Unreal, like doors closing far away. Pine branches sag under ice. The road is barely a road at all now, just two dark grooves pressed into white. A Willys Jeep crawls forward with its headlights hooded, engine idling low. Lieutenant Paul Brennan grips the windshield frame with one gloved hand, breath fogging the air. The driver eases the vehicle around an abandoned horse cart, its wheels frozen solid, its harness empty. Germans came through here last night, Brennan mutters. How can you tell? The driver asks. Brennan nods toward the cart. They left it. The Ardennes offensive, what the Americans will later call the Battle of the Bulge, is Germany's last attempt to reclaim operational mobility. For weeks, Hitler has bet everything on weather, terrain, and surprise. Snow grounds Allied aircraft, fog blinds reconnaissance. Narrow roads favor infantry and armor over supply columns. For a moment it works, American lines bend. Units are cut off. Headquarters lose contact, but the collapse never comes. Because even when radios fail, the Jeeps keep moving. At Bastogne, surrounded and under fire, American command survives on improvisation. Jeeps shuttle between foxholes and command posts, carrying maps, messages, wounded officers, artillery observers. They run without markings, without lights, sometimes without orders. They move because someone has to. A paratrooper later recalls watching a Jeep skid into a frozen courtyard, jump a curb, and stop inches from a wall. An officer jumps out, hands over coordinates, and leaves before the engine fully cools. That's when we knew we weren't alone, the paratrooper says. German forces, advancing on foot and by horse-drawn transport, cannot maintain the same tempo. Fuel shortages force hard choices. Tanks are hidden rather than moved. Orders lag behind events. A German regimental commander near St. Vith receives word that American armor has appeared on his flank. He checks the map. It should be impossible. Then a second report arrives, and a third, all within an hour. The Americans are not advancing along roads. They are appearing between them. Captured German documents from January 1945 reveal growing frustration. Not with American firepower, but with American responsiveness. One officer writes, "Enemy reaction time appears instantaneous. We strike one position, resistance forms elsewhere before consolidation." Instantaneous is an exaggeration, but only slightly. By now, the Jeep has absorbed the chaos of winter warfare into its function. Snow chains rattle. Canvas tops snap in the wind. Engines are kept warm with improvised insulation. Drivers learn by instinct which frozen streams will hold weight and which will swallow axles. They keep going, because they have been trained not just to drive, but to decide. The Jeep does not wait for orders. It carries them. When the weather clears in late December, Allied aircraft return in force. German momentum shatters under bombs and strafing runs. Supply columns are destroyed. Fuel dumps burn. American counterattacks begin immediately. And once again, Jeeps lead the way. Scouting routes, relaying breakthroughs, dragging artillery observers forward. A German major captured near Houffalize is questioned weeks later. He speaks openly now. Our problem, he says, was not their tanks, not their planes. He pauses. It was that they were always where we had just been. By January 1945, the German army in the West is finished as a maneuver force. It still fights. It still kills. But it no longer controls space. American forces do. And space, in modern war, is time. In headquarters from Paris to the Rhine, American staff officers barely mention the Jeep anymore. It has become invisible. A background assumption, like maps or boots. That is its final triumph. Weapons are noticed. Systems disappear. As the Allies push toward Germany's borders, Jeeps roll past road signs with names that once carried dread. Aachen, Cologne, Koblenz. German civilians watch them pass. Small, fast, confident. Followed by the rumble of armor and trucks that seem endless. One elderly man in a ruined village shakes his head. So small, he says. So many. In the ruins of German staff colleges, Allied intelligence officers recover lecture notes written years earlier. Discussions of maneuver warfare, initiative, operational art. The ideas are sound, but the means are gone. The Jeep has taken them. Somewhere east of the Rhine, a German officer watches an American column advance along a road his unit once controlled. Jeeps at the front, antennas swaying. Officers standing upright despite sniper fire. He understands now. Mobility did not decide the war by itself, but it decided who could recover from shock, who could adapt faster than loss, who could turn chaos into momentum. The Germans had once taught the world how to move. The Americans learned, and then built a machine that made movement impossible to stop. Section 6. Studying the Defeat. March 7, 1945. Near Remagen, Germany. Smoke rises in thick columns along the Rhine. The Ludendorff Bridge still stands, damaged, burning, but standing. And American troops are already across it, on the eastern bank. A captured German staff officer watches through binoculars as a familiar shape bounces across the shattered roadway. A Jeep, then another, then half a dozen more, engines revving, radios crackling, officers waving vehicles forward without waiting for orders. The officer lowers the binoculars slowly. It's already over, he says. In the final months of the war, German generals have time to think. Too much time. With fronts collapsing and fuel exhausted, maneuver gives way to paperwork. Orders are written, knowing they cannot be executed. Counterattacks are planned, knowing they will never launch. And in this quiet desperation, German officers begin to analyze what went wrong. Not emotionally, but professionally. They do what they have always done. They study. Captured after the crossing of the Rhine, General Major Fritz Bayerlein, former commander of Panzer Lehr, is interviewed by Allied intelligence. He speaks freely. Too freely, some think. The Americans, he says, were not better tacticians. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. They were better movers. In prisoner of war enclosures across France and Belgium, German officers compare notes. Many have driven captured Jeeps themselves, in North Africa, in Italy, in France. They remember how they felt behind the wheel, how easily it started, how it climbed, how it forgave mistakes. One Luftwaffe colonel laughs bitterly during questioning. Our vehicles, he says, were designed by engineers. Yours were designed by soldiers. The difference matters. German vehicles are optimized for doctrine. Specific roles, specific formations, specific conditions. The Jeep is optimized for use. It does not care what branch you belong to. Infantry uses it. Artillery uses it. Engineers, medics, MPs, airborne units. All the same machine. If it breaks, it is fixed. If it is lost, it is replaced. If it is captured, it still works. In late March, a group of senior German officers is transported to a holding facility in France. During transit, they are moved, ironically, in American Jeeps. One of them, a former operations officer from Army Group B, runs his hand along the dashboard, examining the controls. "This," he says quietly, "is not a vehicle." The others look at him. It is an answer. Allied intelligence officers notice a pattern in post-war interrogations. When German commanders talk about tanks, they talk about firepower. When they talk about aircraft, they talk about air superiority. But when they talk about defeat, they talk about movement, about reaction time, about being outflanked before orders arrive, about never quite knowing where the Americans will appear next. And behind all of it, the same small vehicle. In April 1945, as American forces drive deep into Germany, Jeeps roam almost freely. They scout ahead of armored columns. They ferry liaison officers between units advancing at different speeds. They carry flags of truce, surrender demands, and captured officers back to headquarters. Entire German units surrender to Jeep patrols. Not because they are threatened, but because resistance feels pointless. If the Americans can reach them this fast, they reason, then the rest cannot be far behind. They are always right. One German officer, surrendering near Kassel, gestures at the Jeep that arrived first. "This thing," he says, "arrived before the war reached us." In Berlin, as the Reich collapses, German staff officers burn documents by the ton. But some materials survive: training manuals, staff studies, vehicle evaluations. Among them are notes written years earlier about American industrial capacity, dismissed at the time as exaggerated. One annotation, scrawled in pencil beside a paragraph about U.S. logistics, reads, "If they solve mobility at scale, the war will be unwinnable." They solved it. When the shooting finally stops in May 1945, American Jeeps are everywhere. In victory parades, at checkpoints, parked beside bombed-out railway stations and shattered city halls, soldiers pose for photographs leaning against them. Relaxed, confident, alive. The Jeep has outlived combat. It has become a symbol, but the German generals do not see symbolism. They see mechanics. They see organization. They see a war they once understood slipping away, not because of brilliance, but because of velocity. They had taught the world how to move fast. The Americans had learned how to move continuously. In later years, when German officers write memoirs and reflections, the Jeep appears again and again. Not as an anecdote, but as a conclusion. Mobility, they write, is not about speed alone. It is about resilience, about replacing loss without pause, about keeping command connected when everything else breaks. One former Wehrmacht colonel sums it up bluntly: "We planned operations. The Americans drove them. The war in Europe is ending, but the lesson is already complete, and it will shape every army that studies this defeat, including Germany's own, when it rises again." Section 7. The Lesson That Endured. June 21, 1945. Bad Nauheim, Germany. The war is over, but the work has not stopped. In a requisitioned German villa turned interrogation center, former Wehrmacht and general staff officers sit at long wooden tables under open windows. Summer air drifts in, carrying the sound of distant engines, American engines, steady, casual everywhere. Outside the gate, rows of Jeeps wait in the shade, dust-coated, hoods warm to the touch. Inside, the questions are no longer about battles. They are about systems. Colonel Ulrich de Maizière, a former operations officer who will later help rebuild the West German Army, studies a stack of translated American field manuals. He pauses on one passage, underlined in blue pencil. "Command must move faster than the enemy's ability to react." He looks up. "That," he says to no one in particular, "is what we missed." The interrogations are methodical. Allied analysts are not hunting secrets anymore. They are mapping failure. Why did German counterattacks stall? Why did reserves arrive late? Why did orders take hours, sometimes days, to reach frontline units? Again and again, the answers circle back to the same obstacle: movement, or the lack of it. German doctrine had prized speed. Blitzkrieg had proven that. But speed, the officers now admit, depended on ideal conditions: intact rail lines, fuel stockpiles, disciplined formations, clear chains of command. When those conditions collapsed, so did mobility. The Americans, by contrast, had planned for imperfection. One former Panzer Division Chief of Staff describes it bitterly. When our fuel ran out, our army stopped. He gestures toward the window. When theirs ran out, a jeep arrived with more. Captured German quartermasters are especially blunt. American supply columns, they explained, were impossible to track. They did not move in neat, predictable formations. They flowed. Jeeps ran ahead of convoys, rerouting traffic around bomb craters, collapsed bridges, or jammed towns. Officers did not wait for reports. They went to see for themselves. By the time German intelligence reacted, the situation had already changed. An Allied analyst writes in his notes, "Enemy command paralysis increases in direct proportion to Allied vehicle density." In the summer of 1945, U.S. Army planners begin compiling after-action reports. The Jeep, initially a footnote, keeps reappearing. It is mentioned in infantry reports, in artillery coordination logs, in medical evacuation summaries, in command and control assessments. It becomes clear that the Jeep was not merely a vehicle. It was connective tissue. In one report, a U.S. colonel writes, "Without the Jeep, command would have slowed to the speed of walking. With it, we moved at the speed of thought." German officers read the translated versions later. They do not argue. By late 1945, Allied occupation authorities begin training the first post-war German police units. The vehicles assigned to them are American surplus. Jeeps. German instructors note how quickly recruits adapt, how naturally the vehicle fits into patrol work, communication, rapid response. Some quietly acknowledge the irony. This machine helped destroy the old army. Now it teaches the new one how to function. Across the Atlantic, American industry demobilizes. Factories slow. Contracts end. But the Jeep does not disappear. It becomes civilian transport. Farm equipment, utility vehicle, police car, aid vehicle. Its wartime purpose fades, but its logic remains. Simple, standardized everywhere. In German military journals of the early Cold War, analysts revisit the defeat of 1945 with new vocabulary. They no longer speak only of armor and firepower. They speak of operational tempo, decision cycles, distributed command, and quietly, beneath the academic language, the same conclusion persists. The Americans did not outfight Germany. They outmoved it. One post-war German strategist writes, "The Jeep represented the future, not because it was powerful, but because it was sufficient, available, and ubiquitous." When NATO begins planning its defense of Europe in the 1950s, mobility becomes doctrine. Not massed columns alone, but flexible movement, redundancy, speed at every level. Small units able to act independently. Commanders able to appear anywhere. Logistics able to follow immediately. The ghost of the Jeep is everywhere. Looking back, historians will debate tanks, aircraft, and generals endlessly. But German generals who lived through the collapse rarely argue. They remember the sound of engines arriving before reports, the sight of American officers appearing where no one expected them, the feeling that the battlefield was no longer something you could control, only react to, and reaction was never fast enough. The Willys MB Jeep did not win the war by itself, but it revealed the truth that decided it. Wars between modern armies are not won by who strikes hardest. They are won by who arrives first, again and again and again. The German generals understood that lesson too late, but they understood it clearly. Mobility had decided the war, and it came rolling in on 4 narrow tires, long before the tanks arrived.